Contra. I mean, I was definitely a person that really objected to Iran Contra. It was hard for me not to. You know, I was there in Malibu when a person. I mean, he turned over. It was a very expensive restaurant in Malibu. He turned over with a black couple that was sitting at the table adjacent, and he asked them, "What is the N-word?" He looked over at him and said, "Hey, you guys are the N-word," and he asked them to move. He wasn't comfortable with them sitting so close to him, and that was shocking to me. It was shocking to me, and there were people there that did it. It was shocking to all of us, really. And for that reason, you know, that was it. That was it. Any idea that whatever Iran Contra was anything that I approved of was impossible for me to say. It was for that reason specifically. And I was asked, you know, I had met with James Powell before he flew into Nicaragua, and he. I didn't meet the off-duty police officer. I thought all of that was just stupid. I really did. For the reasons I've told you. And you know, and Honor, before that time, I mean, the events coming to that. I mean, those people were father. They were a father figure to some degree. And my mother was beaten, battered, abandoned, left homeless. It was hard. It was really hard. My mother, when she met James Powell, was living in a hotel. She was living in a van with her children. You know, it was hard. So when James Powell came along, and all of a sudden there was some stability that James Powell brought. It was a feeling. It was a feeling like my mother had overcome living in a van, in a motel, those kinds of things. And I was asked to say that the helicopter was trucked in from Honduras. Was the effort to cover up around Contra before? And I remember. Yeah, it was. Well, I'll tell you what I remember about it. There were rental cars involved, and one of them was a very nice new luxury rental car, and I enjoyed taking that rental car to school. And immediately before we discovered that James Powell was killed in Nicaragua, I was arguing that I wanted to take the very expensive rental car to school. And then that argument, whatever that argument went, who knows? It wasn't really a very important issue, but that was the event that occurred. Then the front page of the newspaper. That James Powell was killed. And those were covert ops that were hard to say were covert because they made the front page of every newspaper in the country for years. and and that was that was that was odd. And the things that I noticed, because I was a political science major at UCLA, where where I knew some very elite people at UCLA that gave me access to the film archives, where I saw the actual UCLA student film made at the 1968 Democratic National Convention. It was the most stunning film I'd ever seen. Really. The FBI actually raided the UCLA archives and tried to seize that footage. The only reason why the UCLA archives retain a copy of the footage is because the film was in the process of being edited, and the FBI didn't think to raid the editing rooms. So, so for that reason, the UCLA Film Archives retained a copy of the student film of the 1968 Democratic National Convention, which was the most stunning footage I've ever seen of a political event. Well, I'll speak about that. I'll speak about that. That film, in my recollection, what that film was, it was a National Guard. I guess there were some Democratic delegates that were not allowed into the convention, and the National Guard was ordered to fix bayonets and march the crowd back. And there were a couple of UCLA student filmmakers that captured the National Guard marching the crowd back, and it was women and children that were mostly behind the crowd, and women and children were pushed through the plate glass windows of the department stores. That's what the National Guard did in the 1968 Democratic National Convention, and it was horrendous. And and, and, and police officers from that era, they could just be seen hitting people in the heads with batons. It was really intense. It was the most intense film footage I've ever seen. And that goes to, in addition, I remember I had to watch films about the Holocaust all the time. And that was hard for me. But where I learned about the Holocaust, I was named after my grandfather, who did a couple other films, and he, what to say about him? I guess his given name was Kleinbach. So I learned about the Holocaust, and I'm saddened that the American people didn't learn about my position that became. Then understanding that the removal of the Klu Klux Klan from the American popular culture and around Contra, that had to occur. I, I was offered work in the film and television industry that I did choose to go to rather than pursue a college degree, which was hard because I didn't really have any support at home. The arguments between Marlon's son and my stepfather really made my stepfather very angry, very angry. And they fought about that for a huge number of years, and that was hard. That was hard. That was the only way that I really knew Marlon's son. And my mother tried to explain that to me on some occasions, and it was just an awkward subject. Marlon had paid for my mother's hospital bills, and he was just that nice of a person. Marlon and my mother were actually more in contact than I was, certainly. Um, and for whatever reason, whenever my mother she mentions a script girl that Marlon tried to hire. If Marlon could hire her on his films, he would. But I'm not sure what connection she had to anything, but that's how my mother's comfortable speaking about Marlon. Coming to the removal of the Ku Klux Klan from the popular culture in the West Coast, that had to occur. That really had to occur, and I had watched it occur. The events coming to the dinner in Malibu were very intense. They were very intense, and it really came to just impossible not to notice how the Ku Klux Klan was removed from the popular culture, certainly on the West Coast, certainly the West Coast, and that was the CIA had to order the people that were reportedly involved with Air America, that were all Southern boys. They were all Southern boys. I mean, they had a fleet of boats, airplanes, all that stuff, and they had Confederate flags on their airplanes and cars, and I got to drive all this. I was young. I mean, I having to fly an airplane with a Confederate flag on it. They all had Confederate flags, and they all had the pneumatic things where you could adjust the air shocks so that they would determine, And I always have to be, I'd fly into town on vacation, that kind of thing. That always lectured me. Now, if you get any parking tickets or anything, you be sure and tell us, because we can't be driving these cars if they have any parking tickets or anything to them. So I was always admonished in those ways by of course, until then I was arrested parking a car and had rented it, not paid for it, and reported stolen. So I parked my car and I apologize for laughing. I parked my car in front of the. I walk outside and there's a PD officer writing a ticket. And I said, "Hello, what are you doing? What are you doing?" He goes, "This car yours?" I go, "Yeah." "Oh, well, it's been reported stolen." And then I ended up in front of the chief of police's office. All of a sudden, James Powell had to show up. And James Powell showed up with a huge amount of money in his own pocket, and the chief of police looks at him and says, "All right, I can tell that you showed up with the intent to pay whatever fines and those kinds of things." And actually rented the car. He wasn't the person that rented the car, so we're going to release him from custody. And they actually had the PD officer that wrote the ticket and that arrested me for the stolen car, because obviously I wasn't the person that had rented the car. He can't apologize to me. Those events made it very hard for me not to notice the Ku Klux Klan being removed from the popular culture of the West Coast. And that had to include the CIA ordering all those mercenaries that were involved in Iran Contra not to kill black people. Ordering the Ku Klux Klan, in effect, not to kill black people, because they had to do that, because if those events occurred, they would make the newspapers, and people would notice the Ku Klux Klan more, and people would then begin to discover the relationship between the Ku Klux Klan and Iran Contra, and most profoundly the LAPD, really, most profoundly. The LAPD that was something I never really understood. I mean, the LAPD, there were detectives that were stealing huge amounts of money from drug smugglers, and that was an intense conflict. The drugs were being smuggled in it's hard to say the CIA didn't know the drugs were being smuggled in. It's very, very hard to say that. Possible, actually. I forgot about it. It was when they began to make films that they did about the. I mean, they literally. It was a very large plane. I mean, I had seen very large planes and boats, not knowing they were as large as a commercial airliner. I mean, they literally had a commercial airliner that was smuggling that much tonnage per haul. and it's literally impossible to say the CIA didn't know about that. So ultimately, what it came to is that the CIA had to order, in effect, the Ku Klux Klan not to kill black people, um, so that the Ku Klux Klan was removed from the popular culture on the West Coast.